Chapter 1. The End of School. It was a warm afternoon, and there was a lovely ray of sunlight beaming into my cage, as golden as my fur. It made me feel so warm and cozy and dozy, I guess. I nodded off during science class. The last thing I remembered, Mrs. Brisbane was saying, "Cumulus clouds." Then I was a-floating away on my own fluffy little cloud, as peaceful as a hamster can be, until I was wakened by a loud, loud, loud voice that could only belong to my classmate. "Lower your voice, AJ." "How many more days are there?" he boomed. "4," Mrs. Brisbane answered. I opened one eye and listened carefully. "Just 4 days until the end of school," she continued. I opened both eyes, jumped up and down, and let out an eek. "Sounds like Humphrey Dumpty is anxious for school to be out," AJ said. "Like me." The end of school? Did she mean that there wouldn't be school ever, ever, ever again? Or was it just another holiday? "I will miss you," said the teacher, "but it's time to move on." "Move on? Can a school move?" "Og!" I squeaked to my neighbor. "Did you hear that?" Og splashed in his tank a little, then let out a loud boing. That's the twangy way green frogs like him talk. "Stop giggling," Gale giggled. "I guess Og is ready for summer, too." "Hands, please, class," Ms. Brisbane reminded her students. She wouldn't be able to remind them much longer. "Yes, Kirk." "May I tell a summer joke?" he asked. At least I heard that Kirk Chen had learned not to blurt out his jokes without asking. "Yes, if it's short," Mrs. Brisbane told him. "What did the pigs say on the beach on a hot summer day?" he asked. "I don't know," the teacher admitted. "I'm bacon! Get it? Like I'm bacon?" Kurt proudly explained. "I get it," Mrs. Brisbane said. Gail giggled again, of course, along with her best friend Heidi. There was a shuffle of feet as the clock moved toward the end of the school day. "Wait for the bell, Garth," Ms. Brisbane told Garth Tugwell. He was always the first one out of his chair. As soon as he sat down, the bell rang, and with plenty of clattering and chattering, my friends in room 26 hurried out of the room. While they hurried, I worried. Was it the end of Longfellow School forever? What would everyone do? And most importantly, where would Og and I go? And what does a classroom pet do when his job is over? Ms. Brisbane straightened up her desk the way she usually did when school was over for the day. She didn't seem bothered by the end of school. In fact, she was humming a happy tune. I didn't feel like humming. Maybe Og and I would go live with Mrs. Brisbane and her husband Bert. I enjoyed staying at their house, but I didn't want to be there all the time without my friends around. How I'd miss Saya and Art and Seth and Tabitha and Miranda. Miranda! I could hardly imagine not seeing Golden Miranda again. "Eek!" I squeaked. Again, it just slipped out. Miss Brisbane heard me and walked over to the table by the window where Og and I lived. "I guess you fellows are wondering what you'll be doing when school is over," she said. "Right, right, right," I replied, although all that came out was squeak, 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 as usual. "Well, I can't tell you, because it's a surprise," she said. And then, humming her little tune, Mrs. Brisbane left room 26 for the day and left me with a lot to think about. While my mind raced, I suddenly noticed it was warm in room 26, even a little bit hot. I almost wished I could take off my fur coat, or that I could swim around in the nice cool water like Og. Not that I ever would, since hamsters should never get wet. And I'd been noticing for a while that the sky was staying light longer, which makes life difficult for a nocturnal creature like me who looks forward to nighttime. One reason I look forward to nighttime is because Aldo comes into room 26 to clean. "Greetings, friends! You are looking at a happy fellow," he announced as he pushed his cleaning cart into the room. Aldo always seemed like a happy fellow, but that night he seemed happier than usual. "Hi, Aldo! What's new?" I squeaked. Og added a friendly boing. "School is out for me. It's over," he was beaming happily, "and my grades were very good, even in Spanish." "Way to go, Aldo!" I squeaked. Aldo cleans at night, but goes to school during the day so he can learn to be a teacher someday. He had a little trouble with Spanish class earlier in the year, so I was happy for him. I thought for a moment, trying to remember the Spanish word for good. "Bueno," I added. School's out, teacher let the mules out," he said with a laugh. I had no idea there were mules at Aldo's college. Mrs. Brisbane had been humming earlier in the day, and now Aldo whistled as he briskly swept the floors and dusted the furniture. The end of school sure made people musical. When he was finished, he pulled up a chair close to my cage and Og's tank and took out his dinner. "No more eating out of paper bags for a while," he said, taking a large bite out of his sandwich. I liked to watch Aldo eat. His big black mustache made it difficult to see his mouth, so when he ate, the food just seemed to disappear. "No, my friends," he said, "when Longfellow School closes next week, I'm leaving town. I'm out of here." I shivered, even though it was hot. There would be no more school and no more Aldo. "Here, buddy, have a carrot," Aldo said, slipping me a crunchy treat as he did every night. No more treats either, I thought. It wasn't just the end of school. It was the end of life as I'd known it. "Can you believe it, Sue?" our principal, Mr. Morales, asked the next morning before class began. "3 days until it's all over." Mr. Morales had a collection of special ties. Today he was wearing a blue one with a bright yellow sun on it. He seemed happy about the end of school, too. But what does a principal do if he doesn't have to go to school every day? "My whole family's going to hit the road," he said. "What about you and Bert?" "We're leaving, too," she said. "Jason's getting married in Tokyo, and we're going for the wedding." Mrs. Brisbane was positively beaming with joy. Jason was her son, and he lived in Tokyo, which is far, far, far away. So I guess she was going far, far, far away, too. Was that her surprise? Was everybody leaving? "What about us?" I squeaked to Og. He splashed loudly in his tank. "I guess we'll have to hit the road, too," I said. But it didn't sound like fun. That night, I dreamed about Og and me on the open road. It was a scary dream because we had to dodge huge cars and trucks that were whizzing by. Once I saw Principal Morales and his family speed right past us, and then I heard a loud engine buzzing. I looked up and I saw it was Mr. and Mrs. Brisbane waving to us from an airplane. Later, a big bus passed us, and a lot of my friends from room 26 shouted and waved. "Golden Miranda," and repeat it, please, Richie, and "don't complain, Mandy Payne." Og and I walked and hopped for hours and hours, but we didn't get very far. I was glad to wake up, I can tell you that, and I was tired from all that walking. But I was happier than ever to see my friends the next morning. When I looked around at them, they were smiling and fidgeting and whispering. They looked unsqueakably happy. Why was I the only one who was upset that Longfellow School was closing down? Nobody seemed to mind the end of school, except me, and possibly Og. That night, after Aldo's visit, I opened my cage, the lock that doesn't lock, It just looks locked, which allows me to get out and have adventures without anyone knowing. And I walked over to Og's tank. Whatever happens, Og, let's stick together, okay? I suggested. It's always hard to tell if Og is listening because he just stares with those googly eyes and a huge frozen smile on his face. Boing, boing, he said, jumping up and down. I can't understand everything Og says, but that sounded like he agreed with me. At least I wouldn't be alone. That was the good news. But hamsters and frogs have very different likes and needs, and that was bad news. I decided it was time to take a final walk through the halls of my beloved Longfellow School. Such a fine building. Why on earth would humans close it down? I felt a little sorry for Og as I started my journey. After all, he isn't able to get out of his tank and roam freely the way I do. Even if he could, he'd probably start to dry out after a while, which wouldn't be comfortable for a frog. After bidding Og farewell, I slid down the leg of the table and scampered across the floor. I took a deep breath, then slipped through the dark, narrow space under the classroom door. It was dark, dark, dark in the hallway, though there were some low lights around the school. There was a time when Longfellow School at night seemed mysterious and scary, but not anymore. I visited the library first, sliding under the door. Even in the semi-darkness, I could see the big aquarium, glowing and alive with brightly colored fish. I scurried forward to take a peek at the little sunken ship lying at the bottom of the tank. It always gave me a thrill and a chill. I wondered what would happen to the fish when Longfellow School was no more. Then I hopped up a series of shelves next to the desk until I reached the top. I pulled hard with all my might and raised myself up on the desktop. It was a few quick steps to the remote control that was always there. I hit the on button and was thrilled to see pictures appear before me on a screen as music played. I never knew what I'd see on my trips to the library at night. This time it was an exciting but frightening movie about a dense jungle with beautiful, dangerous creatures such as lions, gorillas, tigers, and brightly colored parrots. I was gripped by all the howls and growls, the teeth and claws. When the show was over, I tapped the off button, a little reluctantly, since I didn't know when, if ever, I'd have the chance to see a movie like that again. I hurried back down the shelves to the floor of the library without bothering to glance back at the aquarium and the sunken ship. I scurried out into the hallway to have one last look around. I strolled along the darkened hallways, past the other classrooms, down to Principal Morales's office. I looked up at the sign that said Principal, the glass window, and the suggestion box hanging high up on the big door. I couldn't reach the suggestion box, but if I could have, I know what my suggestion would have been. Don't close the school. On my way back, I passed the big double doors to the cafeteria. That's where my friends had lunch every single day. I'd always wanted to see it, and this was my last chance. I slid under the door, but was disappointed to find it was a large empty room, with tables folded against the wall and not a crumb of food left on the floor. By the time I got back to room 26, I was pretty tired, because the hardest part of my adventures come when I return to my table. I can slide down, down, down my table leg, but I can't slide up, up, up. Instead, I have to grab on to the cord to the blinds, which is very long, and then swing it back and forth until I'm up to the table level. Then I cross my paws, close my eyes, and leap onto the table. Whew! Still, as tired as I was, I had a lot of thinking to do. So I took out the little notebook I keep hidden in my mirror and the little pencil that goes with it, and I began to write. Note to self. Unlike hamsters, humans love to make big changes. Unfortunately, they almost always forget to tell their pets what's going on.